Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Who Review. We are looking at the fourth special, as Disney Plus labels it, The Church on Ruby Road. Special 4, or, the Christmas special for those of us in the UK, or those of us still in the UK for Chris. No.
The labelling is all... It's such a, on iPlayer now, if you're gonna do, I'm sidetracking you, Dan.
No, it's
because
a mess.
the labelling is ridiculous. Okay, so this should be the launching point, and I think actually the episode did quite a good job of that. So in that case, don't call it Special 4. Call it. Do you know what I mean? Label it the era. Call it the Shooty Gatwa era or the 15th Doctor or something. Label it Special Naught of the new season, and let alone on iPlayer when you search Doctor Who.
Season 1, Episode 0. Simple.
Yeah, and at the moment on iPlayer, Doctor Who is labelled as Doctor Who 1961 to 86. Doctor Who, and then Doctor Who 2023 dash, and it's like, surely this should be Doctor Who and actually come up when you search the word Doctor Who. If you're going to do this should be Doctor Who and actually come up when you search the word Doctor Who, and then flipping it should say Doctor Who 2005 to 2023 or whatever.
It's a nightmare.
That was a bit
It's
ranty,
in the
apologies.
No. In the UK, it's a nightmare because I watched this episode on Disney Plus because I'm currently outside of the UK, and I had a bit of a nightmare. We'll talk about this, but the ending on Disney Plus is a mess, editing-wise. Like an absolute mess. I don't know how they managed to fuck this up so badly, but the ending of the episode is a disaster on Disney Plus. We'll talk about it. Not to criticize the episode. It's no one's fault other than Disney's for the way they chose to do it. Yeah, we'll come back to that. So I decided on my second
I'm pretty sure we
viewing-
both loved this episode, and we've started this so ranty, but still.
Yeah, we'll get it out of the way. So I watched. The ending is weird, and on my second viewing, which I sat down to do today, I went, you know what? I will use my VPN. I'm not sponsored by them, but I use NordVPN. If anyone's interested, I'm sure you can find watch a girlfriend reviews video and get a code for it or whatever. Got onto iPlayer and watched it through them. Which is the way you would do it in the UK, and I watched it with its original edited ending, which works way better. But finding it, as Chris just pointed out, absolute nightmare. I typed in Doctor Who and it started. I clicked on Doctor Who, play next episode. It played Power of the Doctor. I was like, what's happening? And then I was like, well, it's okay. I'll just click to season, whatever the latest season on this is, and it'll show it me. Nope, it only goes up to Power of the Doctor and stops there. So I had to go right back out, type in Doctor Who again, and then I saw I had 3 options, of which this was the third. Not the first, the third. Who arranged this?
And also if the Whoniverse isn't, I had the other day, if the Whoniverse, for whatever reason, nothing's, I think I looked like, basically, I must have looked at almost the exact midpoint between this and the Giggle. And the Whoniverse wasn't on the homepage. I couldn't fucking find how to get onto the Whoniverse page. There's not a collections tab. It should be listed as a channel, I suppose, ideally. That would be the obvious place. That's certainly where I went to look for it. But like I say, I couldn't find it. It's the organisation of it is mad.
Yeah, and I get it. There isn't anything like this organizationally for iPlayer, right? So there isn't a tab for stuff like this because no other show has the bizarre production history of this where you need to separate eras. I get that. I really do. There's no infrastructure for it, but you've got to figure something out, and it's got to be better than what we're currently doing, because what we're currently doing over on iPlayer is a mess, right? So at least on Disney Plus, it's straightforward. Special 4, cool. It's at least on Disney Plus, it's pretty clean as it goes. Although there's a part of me that wishes Disney Plus didn't have the Tennant specials, because for new viewers, this is where you start. You don't start with Star Beast.
No.
And that will always be listed as the first episode, and it's a confusing mess of a first episode if you're doing that. And that's the real tragedy. Russell has once again, and let me tell you, he's done this 4 times now, written an absolutely banging first episode for a new era of the show. That's a really great little introduction to the characters, super fun episode. just a really good way to kick us in on a new era. But it's not the first thing you'll see if you head over to Disney Plus and type in Doctor Who. If you're just like, oh, Doctor Who's got a new era starting on, it's included Disney Plus, I'll check it out, I guess. The Star Beast, Special 1. I'll start there, I guess. Good luck. Good fucking luck. Oh, there's a man in front of a green screen telling me all about who Donna Noble is. I don't know who any of these people are or what's going on, but I guess I'll go with it. Like, no. Start here.
Yeah, and I think, let me just... Bearing in mind, right, that under categories on iPlayer, they have from the archives. They could get away with under categories putting Doctor Who, especially as, and I don't understand this at all, but I've just discovered in there from the archive section that randomly iPlayer seems to have a tab called EastEnders 2008 to 2011. Right, and I'm like, oh, that must be like iconic episodes. I'm scanning through, and it appears to be every episode of EastEnders that aired in those years specifically.
Fantastic.
That's so weird.
Do they have similar time frames? Like, do they have like 2001, 2006? Like, or is it just that one time period?
Not that I can see. So I then went into EastEnders and searched EastEnders, and I've got EastEnders Real Series, EastEnders Iconic Episodes, and just EastEnders. So I'm like, okay.
Weird.
I don't know what's happening here.
Weird.
But what that says to me is that they could do a collections tab and at least put EastEnders under there as well.
Yeah. I mean, EastEnders is the only other BBC show that's as long running as Doctor Who that I can think of that's still running. So yeah, there's definitely better solutions on both platforms. I think. I wish Disney Plus didn't have the specials. I'm glad they were available for people who were already on board with the show. Right. I am really glad that if you're in Australia, America, wherever, you got them the minute they launched on iPlayer. Through Disney Plus. I am not saying that's a bad thing at all. And I guess I'd rather have that than not. But if this is new era, new jumping on point, all that jazz, and you're launching it on Disney Plus, this might not be the way to do it. Because again, the first thing anyone's going to find when they go looking for Doctor Who on Disney Plus is that. And then if you're on BBC, well, good luck finding it amongst everything else. It's really way too difficult to find this. And I wasn't even looking weeks after. We're recording this on the 27th of December. This episode aired on BBC on the 25th, right, of December. So when I went on iPlayer today, Church on Ruby Road should have been a big banner at the top anyway. I shouldn't have had to have searched. Why I had to search is also a bit beyond me, if I'm being honest. But anyway, right, let's move on from the actual practicalities of how this has been released and the bumps in this whole situation with iPlayer and Disney Plus. Let's talk about the episode, Chris, because as you've hinted at, we both really like this one. I think, right, of the 4 specials we've just had, I think this is the best episode by quite some way.
I would completely agree.
I don't even think it's close. It was paced better. It was subtler. It was fun. It was joyful, but it was also exciting. It's exactly what Doctor Who should be. And the freedom it has gained from being disconnected from the baggage of the previous series. We're still paying tribute to that. We're not pretending that stuff didn't happen. There's a little reference to the Timeless Child, and they work that in a way that actually really plays into Ruby's backstory, which I thought was really beautifully done. Russell, again, actually making use of the backstory he's been handed. Having the Doctor describe themselves as being adopted, I thought was really beautiful. And also, the sort of thing that if you're a new viewer, you just go, sure, the Doctor was adopted. I don't know, whatever. Like, vague, mysterious past.
I didn't love that, actually, but we can carry on. We can loop back to that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I thought that was like a perfect way to go into that. But like, what a great way to introduce someone to the world. You know, we see it through Ruby's eyes mostly at the beginning. The Doctor sort of is like in and out of her life a little bit before he and her properly like team up to solve the problem. The problem is thin enough that we get to spend time exploring the ideas it's presenting, rather than like what we did with the Giggle, where it was running at 1,000 miles a second, and you just couldn't keep up with it, and it was like a headache in a TV show in many ways. In that it just kept going and going and going at such a high pace. Nothing ever really had time to actually be discussed or developed or explored in a satisfying way. And while I still had fun with the ride that is the Giggle, it doesn't nourish or satisfy me in the way an episode like this does, which has a lot more time to breathe and a lot more time to do character work and a lot more time to invest me in what's occurring around. And that's top tier Doctor Who for me. I think Russell is a little too worried about the fantasy stuff. I think he really felt the need to justify this stuff, and everything I've heard him say in interviews and all the commentary and all that, he really was like, well, we had to do the Toymaker first before you can get away with this. You could have got away with this whenever. This is fine.
Yeah.
But you know what? I appreciate that he's keeping it in mind, I suppose, because presumably there is a line somewhere where I wouldn't accept fantasy elements in Doctor Who. But we're in a post-Marvel world where fantasy and science fiction sort of blended into one, and you just go, well, it's a kind of science we don't understand yet, which is just fine. Like, you know, that's such a good explanation for just doing whatever you want, you know. But he makes a real effort to sort of introduce that idea here for anyone who's interested. So yeah, top tier. I really love this. We'll get into the more details. But that's my overall thoughts. I just really love this. I love these characters. I really enjoyed meeting Ruby, and I really enjoyed this incarnation of the Doctor. The joyfulness of this, the tone of this, the character work. It was all top tier for me. I was really, really impressed. I'm assuming you feeling pretty similar, Chris, based on what we've really deliberately not talked too much about this, but we both kind of got the impression the other one had a good time. So.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a romp. I thought it felt like watching a Christmas Day movie. I fucking loved that it was the third most viewed show in the overnights. We'll talk about that maybe a bit at the end, but fuck yeah. Oh man, I was so happy about that.
What was it behind? I didn't look what it fell behind. What did it fall behind in the end?
Mate, Strictly Come Dancing and the King's speech. That was it. Like,
oh, wow.
and obviously that might change, but you would think that Doctor Who has more of a catch-up audience than, say, EastEnders or Call the Midwife or anything like that. Like, for it to beat Call the Midwife is a huge deal. For it to beat EastEnders, especially because EastEnders have done, like, a really big storyline this year. I haven't watched any of it, but I've been aware of it. They planted, I think 7 months ago, they did a flash forward scene to Christmas Day, and then basically 7 months or whatever it's been has been building to Christmas Day, and explaining the flash forward. There was a body in the flash forward, and who was the body, etc. So EastEnders was a big deal, and it beat Doctor Who beat it. Chef's kiss. Yeah. But in terms of the actual content of the episode, I thought it was, we haven't had the only other episode. Well, no, I suppose there's been two, hasn't there? The woman who fell to Earth, and the 11th Hour are the other two that have had to introduce a new Doctor and a new companion. And it's a really difficult challenge. And I thought it was, for me, it was right up there with the 11th Hour. I thought the Ncuti was so instantly the Doctor in a way I've personally not felt since Matt Smith, to be honest. For me, he got there for me personally quicker than Capaldi or Jodie Whittaker.
Right.
I thought he was so instantly the Doctor, but also a different Doctor. A distinct Doctor, and I love what that distinct Doctor is. I thought Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday was brilliant. I thought she was a great mixture of kind of awe, but still feistiness. Her grandmother got a cup of tea, which I thought was just a thread that was just really enjoyable. There was so much kind of rompy enjoyment in this episode. And I really love Ncuti's Doctor, and Ncuti's Doctor it feels like I think the thing to remember, it's not just this show's been on for 60 years, but actually the revived show has now nearly been on for 20 years. We're when we hit 2024 soon, so we're 2 years away, a year to 2 years away from this show being 20 years old.
Yeah.
And this. So therefore, it felt like if the show had gone away for 7 years again or whatever. I know it was away for longer than that last time, but if the show had gone away and came back, this is what a revised version of that 2005 show would feel like. You know, in the way that 2005 moved us along, it feels like this has done the same. And you know, you got to give some elements of that were also there in Chibnall's era. Like, I hate the writing of Chibnall's era, but he did an awful lot for making some moves that, you know, this show is standing on the shoulders of.
Can I ask you specifically what you're referring to there? Because like I can't think of anything Chibnall's era did that's even close to this. So I'm very curious as if you had any examples of that.
I don't think there's anything close to this in terms of quality, but Chibnall's era made, in terms of like the way it looked, and I know we've had this debate and stuff before, but I do think Chibnall's era looked fantastic, mostly. I do think as well the real Chibnall made a firm stamp on things like inclusivity, and obviously we've had diversity in the show before, but it felt like Chibnall made a real deliberate. Nope, we are going to very deliberately do this, and Moffat did the same, and Moffat talked about that. So they all stand on the shoulders of each other. But that's kind of what I meant. I'd need to think. I haven't thought about it enough to make a firm. Do you know what I mean? It was probably quite a sweeping statement that I'd need to justify more with more thought. But that's what I meant basically.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was fantastic, man. I thought it was so light, so fun, and like you, I thought it was the best special by far. It didn't feel bogged down. There were a few things that, you know, I think weren't overly clean. I do have critiques, but in general, I thought it was fantastic. I really did, and I thought Shooty and Millie in particular were brilliant.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think what's really interesting is I think this is the most significant shift we've had in how the Doctor is being written.
Yeah, I agree.
I think if you look at, well, with the exception of Capaldi, but I think Capaldi. So you mentioned earlier about like how quickly you warmed to the various Doctors, and this is one of the quickest you've ever warmed to, and I felt that also. I felt instantly affectionate for Shooty, and the last time I felt instant affection for a Doctor was probably Matt Smith, right? So I didn't feel it with Jodie, and I didn't feel it with Capaldi, but I will say I did feel it with Tennant. So what I think maybe is with Capaldi, they were deliberately not making you warm to the Doctor on purpose at the beginning. They were playing on as part of their story that initial feeling of change being difficult. Like that, because that first episode of Capaldi's era, the plot line was Clara struggling to handle the notion that this was still the Doctor. And that played a theme throughout Capaldi's whole era. We went from am I a good man to always be kind. You know, Capaldi's journey was beautiful. And especially now when you step back and look at it, you know, in a bubble.
Oh, the best arc a Doctor has gone on, I'd argue, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm you know, I know why I didn't warm to Capaldi straight away. That's because the writer chose for me to deliberately not warm to Capaldi straight away. Jodie, I just think because poorly written. She was a shallow imitation of 100 Doctors that had come before her. You know, she was like a pastiche of things the previous Doctors had said and done. She was goofy and she liked her fam, and but also she doesn't like guns for some reason that the show doesn't seem to understand. There's a lot of that, right? So like Jodie, it's a problem because, you know, she's written poorly. She's performing great. I think Jodie gave a really good performance as the Doctor. She just never had the material, right? And that's the reason you never warmed to her. Shooty's a fascinating new thing because what's interesting about Shooty is he feels fully hatched in a way a previous Doctor has never felt. Because with Tennant, he's just regenerated and he's figuring out who he is. So you're on that fun journey of figuring it out with Tennant in the Christmas Invasion. Same thing for the 11th hour. Matt Smith's a bit like, what am I like? You know, am I this? Am I that? You know, do I like bacon now? Nope, don't like bacon. You know, I like fish fingers and custard. Like, he's sussing himself out too. What kind of doctor, what kind of man he's going to be. So again, you're on that journey. There is no sense, not for a second, of Ncuti working out who he is. He comes so fully formed, and with language I've never heard the Doctor say. The Doctor has always spoken in quite a Queen's English sort of way, generally speaking. They've tweaked here and there. Obviously, with Eccleston's Doctor, they made him a little bit more northern. But, you know, language-wise, the Doctor speaks like the Doctor, generally speaking. Ncuti's Doctor, just for the first time in my memory, and I'd have to go back to the classic Doctors to find out if they ever did this again. But the way he speaks is completely different. Could you imagine any previous Doctor saying "babes"?
No, he does it so well. It's so good.
It's incredible.
I
and you know
love
what?
that scene
You know, they would have tried it with 13, and it would have felt cringy. It would have felt like fam.
But it still feels like, I think what I love so much about that scene, like, is he's still, even though he's saying babes and it's different, he's running like the Doctor. He feels like the Doctor still. It's still, even though the dialogue is different, it still feels like the Doctor. Like, and again, I think I said it in when we reviewed the Giggle, or maybe I said it on the TV episode of Nothing But Static, but just everything about that scene, from the way Millie delivers, "They've got the baby!" Like, it was a poor impression, but I just loved everything about that scene. And yeah, like there's other examples as well. It's not just babes. I can't think of any to hand, but there were multiple moments where I'm like, oh, your Doctor is so unique and so your Doctor, and it feels fresh and it feels exciting, like it really does.
But it feels ready-made out of the packet. Like, it feels so complete, so like there's no question of this Doctor's identity or tone or him figuring himself out, which is really unusual. The show normally plays on that, generally speaking. In my experience, the show normally leans into the what are the differences, right? You know. But here it's just, here's the complete Doctor. He's the Doctor. Now, that could very well be because the intention is going to be to at some point reveal that he was off doctoring for some time before he met Ruby, which is very possible. He comes with a brand new Sonic and a new outfit from when we saw him. And I say new outfit, it wouldn't take much to be a new outfit. He wasn't wearing trousers last time we saw him. But that's part of what they've done here, which is why it's such an interesting introduction to a character. And like, he feels different and the same all at once. It's perfect. It's so good and brought to life beautifully by Ncuti and Millie. The only criticism I've seen, and I can't decide if I agree or don't agree with it. Some people have said Millie's characterization is too Clara, and that's really stuck in my brain a bit. Someone sort of said, if you could imagine this exact script word for word with Clara and it not feeling out of place, then something might be wrong. And I don't think I disagree with that.
But I don't think that's helped by things like the mystery and you know, we've got another, like, there's a lot of Clara similarities across the board.
But let's focus on characterization, because I agree with you. There are some, you know, she's one of those very unfortunate companions that is herself wrapped in a mystery, and I never loved that. But let's see. I'll wait till it plays out to judge that, because maybe this will be one of the times that they make that work. There's always room for that.
Actually, yeah, just quickly jump in on that, because I really don't. I just what bamboozles me about that, right, is you just think, but Bill got a lot of praise. Donna is arguably, it's between her and Rose, arguably the most popular companion of the modern era.
Yeah.
And these are just companions where they're just companions along for the ride, and there's no, do you know what I mean? We're not particularly doing arcs with these guys. Donna had an arc, obviously, but I just think why do we need a companion mystery? I just don't think we need it. But anyway, characterization. Yes, I do take your point, but I feel like you've thought about that because you came to the table with this. So what's your thinking of that? Because you've thought about it more than me.
Well,
sure.
it's pretty much what someone said, which is like, I don't think they phrase it exactly like this, but this idea that if you were to take this script and just plug the Clara character into this role, would any words that she said, any choices she made, anything she did be different at all? She is characterized very similarly to Clara. Very quick to do the right thing in the face of weirdness to save the baby because she wants to do the right thing and she's not going to waste time questioning too much the existence of goblins and time travel because she's like, there's a thing that needs doing. That's very Clara. Her strength in the face of the chaos is just extremely Clara, and I don't know. The moments, the vulnerable moments, were what separate her. I think, like when she finds.
I was going to say that's what I was going to say. The vulnerability of the scenes with Davina McCall, which is a sentence I enjoy saying.
Yeah.
Her scenes with Davina. And her reaction on the phone call in particular. And I don't think any of it is... the similarities are in the writing. I think, Millie... It's not necessarily Millie Gibson. I don't think Millie Gibson is doing a Jenna Coleman impression
100%.
at all.
100%. I want to make it very clear I am purely talking about the script and her characterization in the script. Yeah. Millie is doing a wonderful job. I'm really blown away by what Millie's up to in these episodes. I trusted Russell to hire someone good, but she's been exceptional. So yeah, 100% agree with that.
I think the vulnerable scenes are perhaps what make her different. And yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out in the long run. But I just, she's not a million miles from Clara, and I'm looking to the when the new series kicks off in May, I'm looking forward to getting some differences because Clara had moments of vulnerability, she had moments of she switched between the two. So I don't know. We'll see. There's something about the two characters that seems very similar to me. And when someone said it, I couldn't get it out of my brain that was true. And I kept I had it in them. I couldn't even get it out of my brain when I watched it the second time, and it really did stick. But that's that. We'll see, because maybe that's their starting point is the same, but ultimately where they end up is going to be very different. Because obviously we also don't know where her plot is going. Obviously, let's talk a little bit about that mystery and where that might be going. A lot of people think she's the Red Dwarfing it, and that she's going to be she's going to turn out to be the person who left herself on that doorstep. It's possible, I suppose, but it is strange that they've chosen to do it the way they've done it, because. Is there a satisfying answer that isn't it's the Rani or it's Romana or it's one of these predictable, not fun answers? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the problem is, personally, I wouldn't be bothered by that because, as I've said before, I think as a concept, Rani is a good concept for a character, so I wouldn't object to Rani. But I would prefer the idea of it being herself and actually Mrs. Flood also being a future version of Ruby, which when you watch those scenes thinking that's a possibility, there is something in the performance that feels similar, something in the styling, in the makeup that feels similar. The reason I would prefer that route is I want the answer to what is going on with Ruby, what is going on with Mrs. Flood, to not be connected to mythology or the show's past. I hate the idea of it being anything to do with River. Like we've told River's story. I don't see the need to expand.
I am all for River appearing and having adventures with any future incarnation of the Doctor. But I think the major beats of River's story, how she meets the Doctor, how her journey with the Doctor ends, is all been covered now. So I don't want to add to River mythology. I'm happy for River to go on random adventures with any future incarnation of the Doctor to keep that idea of she just kept meeting the Doctor out of order. So fun times with any Doctor. I couldn't thumbs that up more. But yes, any more River mythology. So for those who don't know, the theory I've seen, and it is, I think, the wildest theory from all this, is that Ruby is the Doctor and River's child from her time with the Doctor on whatever planet they lived 27 years. They had their last night on whatever that planet was called. The idea is that they had a kid during that time, or she got pregnant during that time, and then snuck it off and dumped it before going on to the library. I don't care for that idea, if I'm being honest.
No, I don't care at all for it. I would prefer it to be the notion. There's something about the notion of, and like you say, it is. So Red Dwarf in it refers to, it's a very similar storyline was done in Red Dwarf where Dave
I didn't explain that at all, did I?
But the notion that Ruby delivers herself as a baby, the notion that Ruby then watches herself go off with the Doctor when she's older, kind of a complete companion life cycle, I think is a really interesting story, especially because you want a companion exit to be heartfelt, and I've always thought that a good one, in my version maybe it would be two, like you'd have companions that became a couple, and the last adventure would be them as old age pensioners, like going through and seeing, and instead of the Doctor takes them back, and instead of seeing their life with the Doctor, he takes them back, and from afar they view their life together or something. But the notion of doing a story, doing an ending of a companion where it's an adventure with their older self, I just think is a really good, we kind of there is a genuine point, and it's funny because it's all Moffat's companions, but that's all right then scene does really kind of emphasize this forced need to give companions dramatic but also then happy exits when you could just have them leave. And I think we need a Martha and a version of them leaving, but them sort of the Doctor spreading across their whole lifetime, I think is a nice one. So I like that theory and would want it to be that.
Yeah, I think that's the one that makes the most sense. The idea that Ruby sort of, as you said, it's her life. We see her life cycle throughout this episode. She's born through whatever circumstances. Then when she's this age, she travels tons with the Doctor to the point where she gets muddled up with her own timeline, ends up being the one who drops herself off. Maybe we have a sort of Rose-esque episode like Father's Day, where she wants to go back and find out who her mother is, and ends up becoming the person who left herself on the doorstep. Not becoming her own mother or anything, but like she is just a baby that wasn't wanted, and she's the one who ends up delivering her to that church, because otherwise she's just going to be left somewhere even worse, maybe. There's some people theorizing that maybe she's not human as well, and that she's a baby that ultimately they will save from another planet and realize that it's her, and then have to drop her off at the church. I saw that theory crop up a little bit. It's a nice theory, in my opinion. I like it. Either way, the idea that the end of her story is that wherever she ends up, she gets to grow old next to the house, watching herself and her family and being close to them. And then seeing herself, in her older age, getting to see herself go off on her adventures. That's fun. That's a nice idea. Whether that ends up being true or not, time will tell. But I'm willing to go with this whole companion with a mystery idea for the time being. I do think it hampers a companion, or at least historically has hampered a companion to do that, and I'm hoping that's not where this is going. I'm hoping it won't hamper her as a companion by focusing too much on the mystery, that she doesn't get her own characterization. But if it links to a nice character story, which I have no reason to doubt with Russell at the helm, it won't, because that's like his bread and butter, right? That's the thing he does best, is characterization. So yeah, hopefully we get something more interesting than that. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the Doctor's characterization in this episode, and particularly the moment we referenced earlier that I really enjoyed and you weren't as fond of. So for those who haven't but well, you've only just seen it. But I guess maybe if you're watching this down the line and you don't 100% remember the episode, there's a moment early in the episode or middle of the episode where the Doctor sort of is staring at this baby that's just been sort of abandoned. They're talking about Ruby having been adopted, and he sort of adds, I was adopted. I kind of found out recently, and you see him sort of feeling something as he stares at this baby. About himself and his own past, and how his own past has become untethered from what he thought it was. Again, actually doing something with the timeless child idea rather than just being like, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm going to keep saying that for some reason. I loved that moment. I talked about it earlier in this podcast. Chris hinted maybe not so much, so I'm curious as to the logic and the what about that irked you.
I love the moment in itself. I thought the execution of the moment was brilliant. It was one of my favourite shooty moments of the episode. The other being the policeman, which we'll talk about, because I think that scene in general is interesting. So I agree with everything you just said.
I'm being brought tea and a dog. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but these things are happening as we speak, in case anyone can hear it on the mic. So 1 second, Nadia's adding... What's that, Nadia?
She waited in the doorway until you nodded, and then she walked through.
Oh, that's hilarious. The dog apparently waited in the doorway until I nodded, saying it was okay for the dog to come in, and then the dog came in when I did that. That's adorable.
Oh, that's really sweet.
It's a
well-behaved dog.
Oh, they're both really well trained. Yeah. Both really well behaved. Nadia's giving me a look. Oh, you're playing ball with the other dog, keeping it happy. There you go, lovely. Great. Sorry to interrupt you, Chris. Carry on.
So I agree with everything you said, and I think within the confines of this episode, I think it works really well. The only reason I was like, is because I just think it makes bi-generation messier, and this especially I only found out recently, and just this, I don't want to necessarily go over it because we talked about it in the last episode, but this thing of, is Ncuti does he literally split off from the Doctor in that moment? Is he, but he's just got the growth and development on, and had the work, had the rehab as they themselves describe it, and is feeling the effects of that even though they don't remember it because they split off from that moment? Has Ncuti literally lived 14's entire life and then spun off from that moment? But just gone back to that moment to bi-generate? Like, the complications and the messiness around bi-generation, especially saying that it just happened recently, especially we did a whole storyline. He literally, and I didn't like the dialogue because I don't like the simplification of things like therapy. Personally, as again we discussed last week, but he literally says, I'm better because you fixed yourself. And then we return in the same way back to that. And maybe you can argue, well, it's just in that moment, and even though he's gone through therapy, it doesn't mean that he's still not going to go back to certain things when triggered and that stuff. And I agree with that, and that's great. And like I say, I agree with everything you said. In isolation, I loved that moment within the episode. But for me, it was a little bit like, it was just a reminder that bi-generation hasn't really been defined within the show. And I just didn't like that element.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, for me, it actually fit, I thought, reasonably nicely with bi-generation, or at least my interpretation of bi-generation. So it didn't bump up against anything, because I think what they very clearly established for me in The Giggle was the Doctor needed to work through the trauma of, like, everything, like his experiences with losing all those companions, losing half the universe in the flux. Didn't necessarily specifically come back to this idea of the timeless child and the Doctor finding out they didn't come from where they thought they came from, right? And when the Doctor says recently, I mean, yeah, if you've lived 2,000-3,000 years, even if that's 100 years ago, that's still probably fairly recent in the grand scheme of your lifetime. So I didn't find that personally to contradict the explanation of bi-generation that I preferred, and I think we both preferred, which is the notion that Tennant, 14th Doctor, goes on, lives their life, gets better, and then when they pass on, they essentially vanish, and there's Ncuti, and they're in that moment coming out in The Giggle. That's my preferred interpretation of bi-generation. And this, to me, none of this contradicts that and fits in neatly with that. I think somebody arguing recently, I think the use of the word recently, you could say that doesn't fit. But for me, again, I just think in the grand scheme of someone who's lived for thousands of years, even if Tennant's Doctor lived another 70 or another 100 years, that still, for somebody who's lived thousands, that's still reasonably recently that they found that out. They still lived like 80-90% of their life not realizing they were essentially a sort of space equivalent of being adopted. They were a foundling, very much like Ruby. And what I think we gained from this outshines any potential bumps that I might have come across with it, because I thought the way it relates the 15th Doctor to Ruby and her origins, I thought was so beautiful that I'm like, you couldn't miss it out. You couldn't miss the opportunity to do it. And it was so good. It was such a brilliant moment, and it really did make you understand. And also then through that, the moment that hits later in the episode when Ruby vanishes, and the most heartbreaking scene in the sequence in this whole episode is when we see a Ruby-less world. And her mum is just miserable and like is only adopted for money now and then, doesn't have the wall. Nan is sad. Cherry Sunday is sad and just sort of like, I don't have a granddaughter. What are you talking about? I just live in this horrible attic. Like, seeing how much an impact Ruby made on their lives and seeing the Doctor see that. And you almost go, does the Doctor feel better about their own self, knowing that it doesn't matter where you came from, you can still make such an impact? Ruby was this unwanted child that found a family, the largest possible family a person on this planet could probably reasonably have, 30-odd siblings through all these various foster kids. To have grown up like that and impacted so many lives so positively, you've got to wonder, and again, I'm applying this myself, that this is not in the text of the episode, this is very much subtext that I'm seeing in it. But you've got to wonder if the Doctor's using that a little bit on themselves and going, well, there you go. It doesn't matter where I came from. I've impacted hundreds of lives, thousands of lives, whatever, in my time. Different scale, because I am, I am ostensibly immortal. I've lived thousands of years, but the rules still apply. And then it goes back to that old idea of, that's interesting. I've never met someone who wasn't important before. I don't know. It just all dovetailed into itself so beautifully, and I just went like, this is exactly proof of how poor a writer Chibnall was, because Chibnall could have never done something this interesting with the notion. He had an idea that was like, oh, what a unique thing to do and reveal, but then didn't know what to make of it, didn't know how to turn that into a character point, didn't know how to make that mean anything other than just a weird thing to tell us, the audience. And then you look here, what Russell does in, I don't know, 10 minutes. He just smacks you around the head with this genius interpretation of it. I don't know. Everything about it worked for me. It was beautiful. It was clever, and it was my favorite part of the episode by far. And I think, and for me, easily justifiable in terms of the practicalities of it. And I still agree with you. There should be a line somewhere at some point that clarifies how the bi-generation worked, but it does feel like Russell's a bit like, that's in the past, we're moving forward, and I fear we're never really going to get the clarification on bi-generation we want unless it happens again. Which is a real shame, because I feel like that does need to be cleared up. But yeah, it didn't stop me from absolutely loving every element of this episode.
I still think, as we said last week, I still think the cleanest version is the TARDIS suddenly appears, and an older version of 14 jumps down, takes the hit, and gets regenerated. But anyway, I don't disagree with anything you've just said. I completely agree with the nuance, the mavity of it. I think it's genius. I think it's great.
I hate you so much. Let's. I want to get your take on.
All I'm going to say is this, Dan. All I'm going to say is this. Harry in the fifth Harry Potter film, Daniel Radcliffe went through 180 pairs of glasses.
That is a real deep cut for anyone who listens to our other podcast, Rewind Reviews.
And Shooty, I don't know the actress's name, but the actress playing Ruby's mum and Shooty are both the performances in those scenes. Like, in all seriousness, the mavitas they're both bringing to that scene is stunning. Like, and again, it's another example of, because I heard a negative review complaining, it was just horrific. There's some other points from that I might address later. But they were like, the Doctor doesn't cry. I'm not saying crying's bad, but the Doctor doesn't cry. Yeah, we've seen the Doctor well up and tear up before. We've literally seen that. And again, this show's been on for 60 years. All right, yeah, we've never seen it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't. Let's fucking do something different. Why not? Fuck it. And I thought Shooty's performance, and again, a good example of how his Doctor is different, because he probably, potentially is crying more overtly than a Doctor has before. But I think that's genius. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, and Michelle Greenidge, who plays Carla Sunday.
Thank you for looking up her name.
She's one of those. I think she's one of those actresses, because I looked her up to be like, I've seen her in stuff before. I'm sure of it, but where? She was in Small Axe and I May Destroy You, and she even had a small role apparently in Afterlife. I'm not sure how many episodes she appeared in, or if it's oh god, no, it says here she was in 17 episodes. Okay, she's in most of Afterlife. I guess that shows how well I remember that show. She's amazing in this. Like, she is so good, and I think, like, the cast he's able to pull together, Russell, for stuff like this is always impressive. Like, every project he's ever worked on, I don't know I don't know what special juice he has that attracts these amazing performers or helps him identify these really great performers, but he just always absolutely nails it. And on your point about the Doctor crying, yeah, come on, like, grow up. Like even if that's true, that's never happened before, doesn't mean the Doctor can't. And if anything, doing it now gives it more impact. It's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. What a dumb point to make. I've
just looked it up. It looks like she's the receptionist in the newspaper in Afterlife.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen 2019, I guess, season 1 of Afterlife. Oh, I think I did watch season 2, didn't I, in the end, and I didn't like it. So I guess 2020, I guess, was the last time I saw Afterlife. So yeah, 3 years ago. So yeah, apologies. I didn't remember, but yeah, she's very good. She's extremely talented. They all are, though. I mean, Angela Winter, who plays Cherry, Anita Dobson. We'll talk about Miss Flood in a minute, but that's another great character and a great performance. I wonder if we're going to see a little more of Ruby's friends. I think I had to look them up, but like, 1 second. There's the episode. I've got the IMDb somewhere here. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, Trudy and Denzel seem to be, Ruby's friends that she hangs out with at an earlier point in the episode. No idea if they'll return, but I wouldn't mind learning a bit more about them, seeing them more. So,
yeah, same. Especially like they're in a band together. Like, I find that interesting, and obviously we know from the trailer, spoilers, that there's certainly, it would seem to be another episode dealing with music at the very least. And yeah, it's a quick moment to say you're a fucking idiot to anyone complaining about the fact that some of those actors are trans. It's insane, because literally this your issue with Rose is it's the message and all that vague bollocksy nonsense, because you don't have anything real to actually say. Now you're just outing yourself, because literally there have been people on Twitter and in some reviews like, oh, and there's a trans yeah, but what? There's no message. They're just there. So your problem literally is them existing. Then, is it? That's literally your problem, because all they do in this episode is exist, and you've got an issue with that. I think the problem's maybe not with the show. Sorry, that stuff makes me really angry.
I didn't realise any of the cast were trans. Was it one of the friends? Because you brought it up straight after I talked
Exactly. You didn't even realise. That's my point. Like, it's madness.
Right. I'm assuming it's going to be one of the friends, right?
Yeah, the singer is a trans actor.
Right. The only reason I was able to put that together, Chris, is because we just talked about those two friends, so I assumed that's what put it in your mind. I wouldn't have been able to figure it out
literally, but it
otherwise.
just again, it's
through process
it's just them
elimination.
outing themselves. Do you know what I mean? They hide behind all this bollocks with rows of. Oh, you know, it's an allegory. It's for the message, etc. And yet they've still got an issue when simply the character exists in this episode. Yeah. So it's like, well, your issue's not with the stop trying to hide behind it's the storytelling. Then, like, do you know what I mean? It just winds me up.
Yeah, so I've had to step away briefly from the mic, Chris. You might have heard. The cicadas started making... There's a lot of cicadas in Australia. They make a huge amount of racket whenever it's rained recently. And they're doing it now. So there was like a loud noise. I went and shut the door so you can't hear it as clearly. Apologies for interrupting the podcast.
Well, I think it's a joy for the listeners to hear me learn what on earth a cicada is. Is it a type of bird?
No, it's like a grasshoppery crickety type thing. It makes an awful noise though.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah,
Every day's a learning day.
Look them up. They're sort of, I don't know, they're kind of like, do they have wings? I don't know if they have wings or not. But they're quite small.
How do you
really.
even...
C-I...
I don't even know how to spell it.
C-I-C-A-D-A-S. But they make such a loud noise. They're very loud.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, they're little bug things, but I guess to me they look the closest to like grasshoppers, but I think they're winged. But you very rarely see them. That's the problem. You always just hear them. You know they're around, but you've no idea where. They just this like noise that is permeating the night sky. And because I had the door open, it was very loud. You might still be able to hear it now. Apologies if you can, listeners. I can't help it. They just exist here in Australia. Anyway. Yeah, so let's move on because I want to ask you about the plot and the goblins and the singing, because there have been some criticisms I don't personally agree with about it being a little silly or goofy. I thought it was personally I thought it was perfect because it was just thin plot which allowed us to explore the Doctor and Ruby meeting each other and gave us a nice in on Ruby's backstory. But some people didn't care for it. What did you think to the goblins and the actual sort of plot of the episode?
I liked it. Like I say, I think it felt Christmas Day and rompy. I think the line of like, what's a goblin, what's a gremlin is quite interesting. Like, we've got goblins that function fundamentally as gremlins. I'm not too familiar with goblin lore, which is another interesting point of it, because I think maybe the ending was a little RTD. Like, when the Goblin King got destroyed, I was like, I don't understand. So the rest of them are just no longer there? And Jess went, well, yeah, he destroyed the Goblin King. And I was like, oh, maybe that's part of lore that I don't know. And I kind of feel like, do you know what I mean? You can't, if you're going to do fantasy, you do sort of need to explain it for the people at the back. Like, and maybe I'm just a moron, and maybe it is as obvious as, well, the Goblin King got killed, so the rest of them disappear. But I didn't know that, and I feel like you can't just assume a base knowledge. You know what I mean? You should maybe
That's interesting, because I presumed, and let's very quickly, for anyone again who wants into this in the future, there's a brilliant solution to the problem, which is we set up the gloves earlier in the episode. The Doctor uses the gloves to make himself heavy, pull the ship down, and spear the ship on the steeple of the church, and it goes through the Goblin King. It's a really cool visual, a very clever solution. Didn't feel like it was pulled out of nowhere, didn't feel too quick, felt earned. I was happy with all of that. Like you, I was a bit surprised to see the ship sort of vanish. But my assumption was it's because he's destroyed them in the past. That's had a time effect. They're sort of traveling through time, but not, right? They're like baked into the fabric of time through all of these like coincidences and stuff. And I thought by killing the king, he's sort of like the way they erased Ruby from time, the Doctor sort of erased them from time. Because if they never get Ruby and then Ruby grows up happy and is not interrupted by goblins, then they can't be there to go back to that moment.
Yeah,
So
maybe.
it wasn't that they were
necessarily.
necessarily killed, so much as it was that by doing that he righted the timeline and put the goblins where they should be.
Ruby remembers them though.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
think.
mean? Ruby
Oh, yeah,
remembers the
that's a good point.
adventures.
I think they. Yeah, and he has to go save Davina from them. So okay, let me readjust that sentence because I did add an extra part that didn't need to be added. I don't think he's erased them from Ruby's history. I think he's just put them back where they were supposed to be, which is the present. And the present fleeing.
That's fair.
Because they were already bested by the Doctor.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think
That
that's
could
what
be
it is.
it.
But yeah, you're right. The episode doesn't for at least the second week in a row. You know, the Doctor has solved the problem in a way that I'm like, I feel like we needed more explanation. I feel like we needed more.
What do you think? Because a criticism I've heard is that we've got the Doctor like a bit like Whittaker's Doctor, where the Doctor, and admittedly it was one of those sort of hate reviews, but basically making the complaint of comparing it to Jodie's Doctor, locking the big spider in, and basically saying this Doctor's literally killed a thing. But I'm kind of like, yeah, but there's a track. Tennant takes that dude off the spaceship in his first episode and says no second chances. I'm that kind of man, and fundamentally, this is a monster that's tried to eat two babies. So I kind of think I think the show sort of justifies the killing. It's surprisingly brutal and violent. Like, it literally made us watching it jump. I was like, oh fucking hell, you went there with the violence of it.
There were two moments like that in this episode, because the other one is Davina's original death before it's interrupted is quite upsetting for Christmas Day. I wasn't expecting a Final Destination style implication that Davina was, speared on a star on a falling tree. That's brutal. I wasn't expecting Davina McCall to get impaled, basically.
I loved that we're jumping to the conclusion of that, but I loved the Doctor going, Merry Christmas, Davina McCall. Like, when he said Merry Christmas, I'm like, please, full namer, please acknowledge the absurdity of this.
You know what's funny is, I guess for American viewers, that's like completely lost, because Davina McCall is very much a British celebrity.
Yeah. I've watched a few American viewers just be like, I guess that woman's known in the UK.
Right.
Love it.
Yeah.
What...
just to clarify for American viewers, she's a famous presenter from over here, and she does indeed present one of the shows she presents, one of many. She's beloved in this country. She's just a step away from being a national treasure, basically. If she's not there already, she presents an actual show where she helps people find their lost families. So that's like why that is. That's why that's all linked in, and Davina shows up in this episode.
And they contacted Long Lost Family to talk to them about it. And fair play to Long Lost Family, because that's an ITV show. So, they didn't need to help, and they didn't expressly call it Long Lost Family, but also didn't indicate that it was a different show. So, to some degree, ITV must have been, or the Long Lost Family show at least, must have been fairly, been willing to play, which was good. The original point, what do you think? Do you think it's an issue that the Doctor kills the Goblin King?
No, because also I don't think it's 100% clear that that's what's happened because of the way the ship vanishes. Like, I still think it's potentially a time shenanigans thing. But even if it wasn't, and if it was in that, you want to interpret it as explicit death, no, I don't think so. The Doctor has killed to save others before. It's not a hard and fast rule. I don't think the Doctor has ever said, "I won't kill ever" before. He's not He's not Batman. Like, it's I don't know. I don't think so. I think the Doctor is dead. Like you said, David Tennant does it in his very first episode. It's the first thing he does. They kill the Nestine consciousness in Christopher Eccleston's first episode?
I think so. Yeah, there's a history of it.
They pour anti-plastic into the monster's mouth and it dies, I assume.
Yeah, exactly. Just looping back to Davina quickly, I thought she did a really good job. I thought she, look, she's not a trained actor, but the bits, I think Russell lent into the writing of Davina's part was very clever. Fundamentally, really, the only bit she had to act was that phone call, because obviously the stuff at the beginning is her presenting a show for all intents and purposes. But I thought Davina did a good job. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think Davina did a really good job. I don't think there was, it was deliberately not written as a particularly complicated role. But yeah, no, she did. It's not the first time she's in acting as well. I did see she was in do you remember Dead Set, the Charlie Brooker? So before Charlie Brooker, before Charlie Brooker wrote Black Mirror, he did a drama called Dead Set in the UK, which was like, what if the zombie apocalypse happens and the Big Brother house is sort of in session at the time? They're all inside the Big Brother house, isolated and safe. And Davina McCall, who presented Big Brother for the longest time in the UK, gets zombied in that and gets to play a zombie. There's a zombie Davina McCall in that show, and that was super fun, and she was great in that too. She played a really mean zombie. So I was, if you can play a zombie version of yourself, you could do anything.
Someone pointed out that Davina McCall only acts when she's getting killed.
Yeah, why do they keep putting her in shows to kill her?
I know. Here's the thing, Dan. We are an hour into this review.
Yep.
And we have not talked about the song.
Yes. It's delightful. What's there to say?
What did you think of the Goblin song?
It's great. Look,
yeah,
I know some people are annoyed about, the Doctor and Ruby joining in and think that sort of breaks reality because it's like, how do they come up with the lyrics so quickly? But, like, Ruby's lyrics are, like, the Doctor is obviously a quick thinker, that's part of his character. So it doesn't surprise me the Doctor can pull a nice rhyme out of his backside on short notice. That is a skill humans have. There are people out there who can freestyle. That is a thing. And when Ruby does it, she stutters and her rhymes aren't as put together. And at one point she has to use the word fiddly-dee to make the rhyme work. Like,
diddly, yeah, I was going to say Ruby's rhyme is like diddly diddly deet or something, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like what a great way to distract them. They're having a party. The Doctor needs to do something to save the child and themselves, and needs to buy some time. Why not go, well, let's keep the party going? And it makes perfect sense. It worked really well. The song is super fun. I don't mind that the goblins have a little dance and a little sing when they're about to eat a baby. I didn't particularly care for the effort to make it a Christmas #1 and release it, and therefore release the clip early. Because I think out of context, the clip looked worse than when you see it in the episode, I think.
For me, it wasn't that. I can't remember who I was. This thought came from, I think, Council of Geeks, where he was like, "I wish I didn't know about the song. Like, if they hadn't have released that before, that moment would have been way more joyous and way more enjoyable." I completely agree that I don't think they should have released that. It was weird.
Because you said to me, "Why did they release that clip?" And I said, because of this, and I said, you like Russell. I think I said no. I said, I can hear Russell now. Doctor Who, Christmas #1. What a wonderful thing. I did like a joke about Rusty. It's the way he talks. That's a weird sort of infectious enthusiasm that he has. And I said it's never going to work, which I turned out to be correct. Although for a day it looked like I was very wrong, because for the first day it did actually chart. In the end, it didn't get to Christmas #1. But I just think the harm you did to the episode in your attempt to do that, less good. But with that said, it made a bunch of money for charity, the song, by releasing it. I still think think they could have done that by releasing it after the episode aired, though.
Yeah, and I agree. And if anything, they could have made more, because more people would have. Imagine if at the end it said, "Now available. Did you enjoy the Goblin song? Well, it's now available on Spotify and iTunes, whatever. Everywhere."
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not against them releasing it in general, but I think releasing it ahead of the episode as a promo material for the episode was slightly misguided, because I think it works better in context than it does out of context. And there are much more fun scenes they could have chose with the Ruby and the Doctor to sort of like put out prior to the episode airing as a little teaser clip. So
Yes, agreed. I think but I don't have any issue with them doing a song. Like, again, like this show's 60 years old and it was new. We've never seen that in Doctor Who before, and it was rompy fun on a rompy fun episode. Like, it's a Christmas Day episode. Of course, it can have a musical number.
To be fair, the very last episode had a musical number in it. to be fair.
Well, yes, true. Well, yeah, and the episode before, and the Power of the Doctor, and we've seen the Master. I guess we've never seen the Doctor engage in a song.
Yeah, we've also, and I guess it's never an original song. It's usually a pop hit from the time.
No. Yeah. And
because we had the Christmas episode a couple of years back where they had the opera singer. And they did A Christmas Carol, and she sang. And then they did the episode where they were on a Mummy on the Orient Express, and the lady sang there. Actually, there's quite a lot of precedent, the more I think about it. So anyone who's complaining about this can go shut up.
I think it's absolutely fine. What do you think about the fact that they've come out? I can't remember if it was a tweet, so I don't know for sure, actually, if this is confirmed. But the notion that the snowman... So we know categorically that the snowman falling was added in later, because that was shot recently. And we know that was part of reshoots for this. Yes. Apparently the notion is that Disney felt we should see more of the Doctor sooner.
Yep.
What did you think of that scene? Because I didn't care for the snowman, to be honest with you. I didn't care for the way he treated the woman with the pram, but I fucking loved the exchange about the policeman's wife saying yes. I loved everything about that exchange, especially the way the TARDIS dematerializes in front of him, and he just walks away going, she says yes. It's such classic Russell T Davies writing. So while I pee... Tell me what you thought of both of those elements of that scene, and whether it was whether we needed that scene.
Yeah. So I think Russell talked about this on the commentary. That's where this has come from. I think people have been tweeting about it, but I think it came from the commentary track, because I heard Russell talk about it on the commentary track, which is fun. If anyone's not heard it, he does it with Millie Gibson, and she's got some interesting stuff she talks about. Like, she talks about how that she didn't actually audition with any of the scenes from this episode. She auditioned with a scene from the next episode 1 of the run, and that scene has actually been significantly trimmed / cut from that episode in the end anyway. So it's all very interesting. It's a good little commentary for anyone who just wants some little tidbits. There's nothing groundbreaking. There's no like massive reveals in it, other than Disney did review the episode and feel like we needed to see the Doctor doing something a bit more heroic sooner than we currently did. So if you take that scene out of the episode, the Doctor doesn't really show up in any way that's significant until the rooftop, right? And then he comes in to sort of join the situation and kind of. And I think the episode would have worked fine without it, but I do think that it was nice to see the Doctor earlier, and it was nice to see the Doctor saving Ruby specifically and showing him as the hero for a brand new audience, and introducing the Sonic in a better way than is later introduced when it turns up on the Goblin ship, where he's just like, it's a Sonic, it's Sonic's things. Like, I need screwdriver, I need Sonic screwdriver, I need screws for a screwdriver. Like, it was a bit quick and a bit weird, a strange way to introduce it. So I was okay with the choice. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it would have been a massive problem to remove it either, being honest. But I think that it's there is fine. It blends into the episode neatly. It adds to the building tension of all the accidents happening around Ruby. And it's kind of a fun visual on Christmas Day, the Doctor bursting out of a snowman. And then, as you said, it leads to quite a fun interaction with the police officer. I do agree with you that his whole, like, what are you doing with a pram at midnight is a bit weird. It comes across a bit mean, and it's the only time in this entire episode this Doctor comes across as anything other than an absolute joy. So I found that strange, because he's mostly a very positive, enjoyable guy that's like just, this is the first time in a while, and I really love this, and they get this right in Big Finish quite a lot. But this idea of the Doctor having fun while saving the world is really, really good. And the show has gone into a bit of a trend of the Doctor being quite a dour, miserable, serious character all the time. But the idea of the Doctor being fun and the cicadas finally stopped. That's nice. And they're back. Okay. Shouldn't have prayed to that god. As soon as I said it out loud, I knew it was gonna revert. So I really liked the way this episode characterized the Doctor as having fun. Like when they first get down from what was a potentially life-threatening situation for them and a baby, they're like laughing and giggling, and it was like, look at that was crazy. Like they're having fun on the adventure, and I really love that. And I think that's a really nice place to characterize this Doctor. So yeah, that moment where he yells at the lady feels really out of character, and you can tell it was sort of written separate to the rest of the episode, and it doesn't fulfill the thing that the rest of the episode does quite consistently. I do think it's interesting that we've already had signs of Disney's involvement in the show. I wasn't expecting so soon for there to be indications of their involvement. But again, it's a minor thing. It added a fun scene that I don't think hurt the episode. You could debate whether it actually was needed, I think, but I don't think it interrupts the flow of the episode or causes any problems. So I'm a bit neutral on it, because I just think, like, if you didn't like it, it's such a trivial, brief moment in the episode. And if you did, then you did. And I don't know. It's a bit much of a muchness. I don't think it really makes too much of a difference, and it does potentially make the episode more accessible, which I'm all for. And it's a big part of my whole vibe with this right now, which is like growing the audience for Doctor Who. So yeah, I was okay with it. I'm assuming you had similar feelings.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I like I said, didn't love the pram, but totally worth it to get the scene with the policeman, which I thought was really setting up the Doctor and the mystery of the Doctor well. And I just thought that, again, the shooty of it all just shining through with the whole. And that's why because the sales start on Tuesday and you just couldn't wait, and that's why she loves you, and the sweetness of the guy being like she says yes, and that's all he can concentrate on. I love it. Speaking of new audiences, Dan,
yeah,
are you ready for a hot take?
Go on. I love a hot take.
I don't think the 14th Doctor should have had the new TARDIS. I don't think the TARDIS should have randomly changed appearance between him stepping out between that basically as they during the adventure of the Star Beast, the TARDIS randomly changes. I think that if Tennant they spend so little time in the TARDIS, Tennant should have just had 13's TARDIS, and then we should have got a full-blown... Because it felt like they were trying to do it's bigger on the inside, but they were kind of doing it for people that already knew it was bigger on the inside. And I think if you keep that TARDIS back and you have Millie Gibson step into it, and you could do more of the reveal of that TARDIS with them in that moment... And I think that would have been... Because I suddenly realised they were sort of hiding the interior of the TARDIS. And I was like, oh, of course, if this is for new viewers, then actually the reveal of the TARDIS at the end and us having a it's bigger on the inside moment is actually really cool and really important. And I think that moment would have been more beneficial if we do a full-blown sweep of that TARDIS because it's new for the older audiences too. It felt like it was kind of an in-between thing, and actually if you don't give Tennant the new TARDIS, and I just kind of think, the title sequences, the TARDIS, the logo, we had it all revealed with Tennant, and I think it would have been nice to keep something new back for Ncuti, because in the way that Eccleston and Tennant share everything, and that's slightly, apart from a costume, and that slightly kind of bugs me a little bit oddly in my brain. I think it's a similar thing now with Tennant and Ncuti, and I would have preferred it, actually. I think the TARDIS would have been better saved for the moment at the end of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a massive problem, because I think if you're a new viewer...
No.
It is held back in this episode and is a bit jaw-dropping when you see it, because it does still get a reasonably sweeping shot and ore and all that stuff. And if you're an older viewer, well, you're like, oh, it's the companion being surprised by the size of the TARDIS. I already know what it looks like because I watched this show, but whatever. You don't really think about it too much. But I think on the whole, I agree with you that Tennant got to sort of break in all the new stuff, like the new TARDIS, the new titles. They should have all been saved for this episode in general, because I really feel like those specials should have felt like they weren't stepping us into this era. They should have felt like they should have felt more like the closure to the previous era, and therefore I think they should have had an older TARDIS design. Even if Tennant's TARDIS just looked like Tennant's old TARDIS, or if it continued to look like Jodie's, I really don't. Either way, it doesn't bother me. It shouldn't have been the new TARDIS. The new TARDIS should have been here, but not because I think it necessarily affects this episode, but just because I think that in general. Does that make sense? Like, I don't think it's much. I think it's much of a muchness in the grand scheme of what's happened with these episodes, but I just think in general, the new titles, the TARDIS reveal, all of that stuff should have been saved for here, for the new audience's benefit, and because otherwise, the start of the new generation of episodes, season 1 as they're dubbing it, is too linked to the previous season, because we just introduced this TARDIS there. And why does Tennant get to break into TARDIS before Ncuti does? It's Ncuti's TARDIS. I just think there's an element of like it should it should be Ncuti's TARDIS. So I feel. Yeah, I do feel. I agree with your point. I don't agree with the reasoning. I don't think it affects these episodes much. I just think that I have a wider issue with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, complete sense.
Yeah. Let's talk about Mrs. Flood, because this is another big thing. And in the talk about Mrs. Flood, we're going to talk about what happened on Disney Plus. Actually, should I start with the Disney Plus version of this?
Yes, yeah. Because and can you send it to me as well? Because I really want to see this.
It's fucking insane. Okay, so I've got it in front of me right now, queued it up, so I can describe it to you. So Millie comes into the TARDIS, mouth agape. She's looking around, and then we pull back and reveal Ncuti stood in the distance, big cheesy smile. She shakes her head and she says, "Well, I can't remember what her line is." And then it zooms in on him, and he sort of smiles and he says, "Like, I'm the Doctor." And then it cuts to titles that say "New Home, New Who," like graphics, and then we just have a random shot of Ncuti opening his eyes, which I think was in one of the trailers. Then it says Spring 2024, Disney Plus, and then we see the TARDIS vanishing on the street, and we have the reveal of Mrs. Flood knowing what a TARDIS is. But at no point does credits roll.
That's so weird.
During any of that, and because we have footage over those words of Ncuti, the whole thing gave me a fucking headache. I watched the BBC version, and for those of you who are listening to this who are international viewers who watch this on Disney Plus and that's what you saw, let me tell you how the BBC version goes. She goes in, we cut to Ncuti, he says, "I'm the Doctor," and then the credits roll. And then halfway through the credits, sort of Marvel style, we then cut to the shot of the TARDIS going away, and we get the Mrs. Flood moment, which we'll talk about in more detail in a second. What the fuck were they doing on Disney Plus? I know they wanted to promote that this is the new home of the show, and then it's coming back in 2024. I get that, but do that at the end. Why do it here in what feels like the middle of the episode? It's so bizarre, and I didn't realise that's not what you got on the BBC initially. So I text Chris like, "What the fuck was with the editing on that ending?" And Chris was like, "What are you talking about?" It's so bizarre, Chris.
Literally, like, huh?
I'll film it on my phone, just that last minute, like 30 seconds to a minute, and send it to you tonight. And you can have a look at it yourself. But it's so weird. And you've got to imagine it as well from my perspective and how disorientating it was, because it never felt like the episode ended, and suddenly there's just text over footage of Ncuti. And then the TARDIS is dematerializing. It felt like an advert interrupted the end of the episode. Like it was because of the way they do it without the credits having rolled. It doesn't feel like a mid-credits thing. It just feels like a thing that's happening inside the episode. It's so strange. It's headache-inducing. I don't know what they were thinking. Disney Plus can go fuck themselves with that, because that was awful. I hope that doesn't happen again.
What's also weird about that is that it's like, presumably they then had to put the beginning of the credits after the Mrs. Flood thing.
Correct.
Like, it's just so weird.
Yep.
so weird.
That's exactly what happens.
Just if you really want to, if you're worried that because it's streaming and you're worried that people will be able to click away, one, you could arguably control that. Don't minimize it or put up the option to view the next episode or the next thing or whatever. But if you're really worried about that, just take out the credits and simply have him say, "I'm the Doctor," and then it cut to that end scene.
Yeah, so bizarre. So bizarre. But I couldn't for the life of me figure out why they chose to do it that way. I really couldn't. Let's talk about Mrs. Flood. A lot of speculation, a lot of thoughts, everything from the Rani and River and all that stuff. I'm a bit confused about it because I watched the episode a second time today, and I will say she does behave in a way that doesn't seem very consistent. Because at first she's yelling about the box being there, and she's very confused by it. And then when it vanishes, she drops her shopping in surprise, and then she's all knowing and all like, "You never seen a TARDIS before?" And she's all like, "Hey, Doctor, off on your adventure then. Ruby, he's over there. Go on. And she, baffled as to this character and what their intentions with this character are. Do you have any ideas, or how did you feel about it? Did you feel her looking into the camera bothered a lot of people too? Because that feels a bit fourth wall breaky. I don't know if we've ever had a character do that in Doctor Who before. Be aware that they're on a TV show, it seems, and talk directly to the audience. It's a bit strange, a lot strange actually. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, a lot of people have pointed out that we have had it, like the first Doctor, basically. I know there's an in-universe explanation for it, but doesn't he basically talk to the camera with the "one day I shall come back"?
Yeah, but he's talking to Susan, though. So he's talking to her through a door, and
Yeah,
we're just face on. So he's not talking to the audience. He's talking to Susan. Whereas Anita Dobson turns to the camera, talks to the audience. Mrs. Flood talks to the audience, which I cannot for the life of me figure out how you make sense of that.
No, I don't. It didn't bother. I don't think it makes sense, but because it's an after credits thing, that didn't bother me that much personally. I get it. If you're annoyed by it, I understand, but just personally, that didn't really bother me. No, other than the sort of older Ruby thing, again with the Ruby mystery, I just want it to be contained to this series. And in my opinion, the Rani would be, because the Rani fundamentally would act like the Master. It would be a new villain for this series of New Who, as opposed to her being the Master or connected to River or something like that. I just want it to be contained within this supposed fresh start for the show. I have no real... Other than if I was forced to bet on a theory right at this moment, I'd bet on older Ruby, but I have no sort of this way or that, and I kind of prefer that as a mystery to what's going on with Ruby, because I don't particularly love the idea of the companion being the mystery box. So,
yeah, I mean, so you're hoping it's a villainous character, right? Like, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm hoping, and I would, if I was forced to pick what it is now, older Ruby.
Right. That's what you're hoping for. Okay, yeah, good. I agree. That's what I want it to be. I don't want it to be a villain, if I'm being honest. I don't think there's any satisfying answer to that, if I'm being...
No, and I don't think the rest of her actions, when she wishes Ruby good luck, do you know what I mean? I don't think, other than looking to the camera... There's nothing particularly villainous in the delivery, other than that, have you never seen a TARDIS before in the wink? But even that, the wink, you could argue, is cheeky. I'm not sure I don't know if you've seen Unleashed yet. I don't think Anita Dobson knows. I think it's so far in the future that certainly at the time Stefan Powell was interviewing her, she didn't know.
I disagree.
So I think will be.
I watched that interview.
Do you think she knows?
Yeah, I think she exactly knows. He's like, when he's questioning her, she has a real twinkle in her eye. She knows exactly what she's doing. Like, she's been told. Yeah. She won't have read the scripts, which I think is a good way to get round it. Oh, I've not read any scripts, I don't know. But she definitely sat her down and explained who her character is and what's going on for sure. There's no way Russell didn't. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. But yeah, I enjoy. Maybe I'll be proven wrong later on that point. It's possible, but I don't think so.
I enjoyed a lot of people were like This made me laugh so much. For context, for international listeners, Anita Dobson played a character in EastEnders, which is a big soap opera in the UK, and she was involved in a storyline where she lied to her husband Den, and Den presented her with divorce papers on Christmas Day, and it was like one of the most watched TV moments in the UK of all time. Potentially the most watched outside of kind of sporting or royal related events. And so many people were tweeting like Anita Dobson like mixing it up on Christmas Day back where she belongs. Basically talking like trying to make out she's like an icon of Christmas because she's been involved in 2 like juicy Christmas TV scenes. Which really made me laugh.
Yeah, that made me chuckle too. But it's good. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think Russell knows exactly, what she's famous for, and delighted in the idea of bringing her back on a Christmas Day special. Like Russell is a TV, especially a English TV sort of, expert, so to speak. He knows his broadcast history, and he definitely is familiar with where Anita Dobson, what her history is. He will have delighted in that possibility, I'm sure. I'm confident. So yeah, I think on the whole, this is, what a promising start to an era. I think the thing we talked about last week or a few weeks ago, about Russell needing to really set a different tone when he got down to this episode, he achieved. It is completely different to those 3 specials in the best possible way, and I'm really excited to see where the season goes. We don't have to wait too long. I think they've confirmed May as the start date for the series, and also Russell accidentally confirmed May 2025 for the next series too. So we know when the next 2 series air. It's going to be May 2024, May 2025. So that's, yes, please. I'm here for it, and I'm really excited for this new era, and I'm feeling a lot more confident now. And it's not to say I didn't enjoy the 60th specials, but I'm more confident in the direction after this episode than not. It was an absolute delight, and I loved seeing Doctor Who be fun and rompy again in a way that it just wasn't under. I think Chibnall and Moffat to some degree. Moffat liked to wallow in the angst of the Doctor also. And that's not to say that Russell never did that, but Russell balanced it more, I think. For every Waters of Mars, you had, what was the one, the Easter special from just before that? The Planet of the Dead?
Yeah, I think a lot of Moffat's run, the rompier ideas, especially the fucking great ones, weren't necessarily written by him. The big one for me being Mummy on the Orient Express and Flatline.
Yeah, but even that one, Chris, is all bogged down in Clara's mad at the Doctor and he's letting people die to figure it out, and it's all very much in the depressing elements of death. Well,
even what I was going to say was even his rompier episodes feel quite dark. Even just aesthetically, you think about dinosaurs on a spaceship. You hear that title, and it's arguably the rompiest title you've ever heard. But the episode itself just feels really dark and gloomy, and same with the Curse of the Black Spot.
Yeah, because isn't the dinosaurs especially? But in the end, it's a guy that's killing the last of the dinosaurs or selling them on as because he's like a space, but he's dying of he's like a space animal stealer, and he's dying of space cancer, and it's Jesus. The episode is called Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. Lighten up. I don't know. And that episode ends with a big moral quandary of whether the Doctor is right to kill him to save the animals. And, I don't know. Moffat's era had a lot of that, I think. And I'm sitting here now, having just experienced such a delightful, genuinely fun episode, which still had dark subject matter, but even dealt with that in a fun way. I'm here for it. I'm really enjoying it. This was a great episode.
I loved it. Could I just give, before a little wrap-up on mine, could I just do one more quick responding to negative criticism?
Oh, yeah, please. Absolutely.
It's a different show. It's a completely different show now because of the two main examples of why it's a different show appear to be the fact that 15 seconds of whatever it is was set in a nightclub, which featured the Doctor dancing. We've seen the Doctor, Matt Smith danced at a wedding. Well, it's just a nightclub. Calm down. You're fine.
There's
Like,
an
don't worry
episode.
about
There's
it.
an episode called "The Doctor Dances."
Well, thank you, Dan, because the other thing is, it's a different show. It's a completely different show because of the I spent a long hot summer with Houdini line. Now, one, in terms of the, historical figures being used to teach the Doctor something, that's used a lot. And two, as a suggestive joke, it is completely online with most of the dialogue in the Doctor dances, with River saying that she's a screamer and that's a spoiler, with Jackie Tyler asking what else he's got two of, with the Doctor saying that other parts of him are cold, with the Masters embracing and John Sims Master saying, is it bad that I'm, and Missy looking down and saying, yes it is, like Jack, his name is Alonzo, oh yeah, that's gonna happen. You can literally watch compilations of the Doctor having subtle adult humour spun into it. So what's the difference with the Houdini, thank you. That ruined my rant. What's the difference with the Houdini line? Is it the fact that the Doctor's saying it and there's a slight there's a slight subtext that is a different type of adult humour? Like, it's ridiculous. Like, your problem is not the adult humour because that exists throughout the show. Your problem is the leaning of the suggestive nature, which is insane and not a fucking problem because it is completely comparable to literally Jackie Tyler saying, what else does he have two of? And looking at his crotch. Like, or River saying, I'm a bit of a screamer. Spoilers. Like, it's just madness. It's exactly the same show. You just don't like what you're reading into that line. And you could read that line without that suggestive nature in either. And there's nothing wrong with it being suggestive in that way either. Like, it really wound me up.
And to go on the dancing thing, with the Doctor dances as well, when Eccleston's, talking about, I can dance, of course I can dance. It's plot related, whatever. In this, it's plot related. If you want to be the sort of person who says, well, my Doctor doesn't just go to nightclubs in his spare time, he's off saving the world. Fine. Well, you know what he's doing here in this episode? He's watching Ruby.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah.
There is a perfectly reasonable plot explanation for why the Doctor is in that nightclub. So if you don't like the idea of the Doctor just doing that in his spare time, which I think is fine, personally, but if you don't like that idea, well, in this episode, he doesn't do that. That's not what's happening in this episode. Maybe he does. I like to think the Doctor goes to nightclubs on his day off. Why not? The idea of Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor going down to the club delights me to no end in that technical the dream coat. Yes, please. But my point is, even if you don't want to think that the Doctor does that in his spare time, he doesn't in this episode, so nothing has changed other than you're looking for things to be unhappy about. That's what's changed. You aren't happy with the episode. You're looking for reasons to be grumpy. And you know what? That's a sad life to lead, because that is not an issue. There are legitimate criticisms people could aim at this episode that I would go, I didn't feel that, but I understand where you're coming from. And then there are nonsense criticisms like those.
One of my favourite things. I completely agree with you. And on the dancing thing,
defy what's physically happening. Anyway.
On the dancing thing, I really like, especially because it's so beautifully fit with the element of bi-generation that I like. I wish the logistics were cleared up, but the notion of the Doctor took time and is now in their well-being is a better place. The notion of this Doctor just being like, well, fuck it, I'm going to go out and dance, fits the characterization of this Doctor, and also is kind of a payoff to show us Tennant doing the work. So one, there's that, but two, I love, in terms of looking for criticisms, there was a comment on one of those videos, and I love that all these people are using that hashtag like RIP Doctor Who, and it's like, it's really weird because for a show that you think is dead And for the fact that every time you review it, you go, I'm not watching the show anymore. You do seem to still be watching it and talking about it for a show that's supposedly dead. But someone commented on one of these videos arguing with the person and presenting an argument as to why they disagreed with them. The comment back was like, well, thank you for giving me a view just because you watch something to get triggered. And I'm like, your whole review of this is framed as someone watching something to get triggered. Like, that's what you've done with an hour-long episode of television.
Your bigotry is showing. Look,
less of those.
Let's end on the good stuff here. This is a brilliant episode.
Yeah, less of those.
An absolutely incredible episode. Certainly the best of these episodes, the ones we've given. I think it was paced better than anything that we got in the other three specials. I love this tone. I really like the direction we're going. I love the refocusing on sensible character beats. I love how quickly Russell has done more with The Timeless Child than Chibnall ever did with it. It's just stunning what I'm seeing at the moment. And then on top of that, we've got this incredible production design. And you know, one thing I will agree with as well when we talked about the 13's era, the production did take a step up in 13's era for sure, in Chibnall's era. That's absolutely certain. Those episodes looked, generally speaking, very good. But we're taking yet another step forward here. The stuff of Shooty in the snow, the reason I said Shooty there actually is because I'm thinking to his section on in his section complaining about the snow not tasting very nice in the Unleashed was very funny. But the 15th Doctor in the snow at the church looked stunning. So it looks expensive. The script was tight. The story was super fun. It left us plenty of room to do character work. I love the new characterization of the Doctor. I love how complete and confident it feels. This is a very confidently written and executed script. Everything about this was pretty much top notch for me. The closest thing to a criticism I have of this episode is I think they went a bit too far with the CGI on the goblins. In Doctor Who Unleashed, you see them minus the CGI. I think they look better without it. I don't think CGI is a bad thing to emphasize eye movement and give them a little bit more characterization, but they put so much CGI on top of the practical effects that they ended up just looking like entirely CGI creations, which is a shame because when you see Unleashed and you see them without the CGI, they look pretty good, pretty convincing. But other than that, come on, this was an absolute home run, like 9 or 10 out of 10 episode. It was brilliant. I loved every minute of it. Can't wait for more. That's where I'm at.
I agree. I thought in particular the freshness of it, the fact that it felt like it felt like an updated version of Doctor Who. And again, you know, like I said at the very beginning, this version of the show came back nearly 20 years ago. So that felt like the right thing to do. It felt fresh. It felt exciting. And I thought Shooty Gat was arrived fully formed as the Doctor. And it's brilliant.
100%. Well, yeah, so thanks everyone for listening. I don't know what we'll do when the show comes back, if we'll review it episode by episode like this, or if we'll just wait till maybe we review 4 at once and then do the next 4 at once. There's 8 episodes, if memory serves. So do 4 and 4. I don't know if we'll just wait and do them all together, or if we'll do it between. I have no idea. We will see what our schedules look like at the time. But we'll definitely have some version of it up, whether it's just one episode covering the series or not, or you know, like a double length, like a 2-hour breakdown of everything that we split into 2. But whatever we do, we'll definitely be covering in some way the new series when it airs. Because the thing is, we're so excited, we're so engaged. We're going to have an hour-long conversation on the phone about the episode anyway, aren't we, Chris? So we might as well stick microphones out and record the damn thing. But yeah, I'm very intrigued about the show, and I'm really excited in its direction. And I'm pumped for Doctor Who again for the first time in, 4 years, 5 years? Capaldi's last season was the last time I was in any way excited about Doctor Who. So, actually, that's not true. I was excited in the build-up to 13. And then that slowly ebbed away as we did season 1.
I think
I was very excited in the build up to 13. In fact,
Same. We were both pumped for 13. Even Capaldi, like I loved. I think his best season is his last season, but
Yeah,
I didn't watch every episode live. Like this is comparable to Matt Smith's first season levels excitement. Maybe a little bit under, but yeah, I think closer to that than anything else has been.
I would agree. Yeah, because even Capaldi's first episodes had the leaks, so they were kind of spoiled. They were released in like black and white, like a few weeks earlier. The scripts were released, so it was like, well, we that was kind of spoiled. But yeah, big love to Doctor Who. Well done to Russell and the team. Shooty, Millie, they're all doing a great job, and we're very excited to see where things go. So, yeah, big thumbs up for all of it. I'm really excited. Obviously, if your thoughts, comments below, as always. But thanks everyone for joining us for this particular, and again, extended. I'm surprised at how long we talked. An hour and 40 minutes is a lot. But yeah, Doctor Who's back, and we're excited about it. Hopefully you are too. Well, that's it for this week on Who Review. So I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And I guess we'll see you in May.
Bye.
Bye.